Divas, the Booker Shortlist was announced yesterday, so clearly we need to do a deep dive. Yes, I feel like we've put in this much effort. We have talked about a reading plan. We have talked about halfway thoughts when I got halfway through all these. We talked about all of them and then went through a whole cage match style of my shortlist predictions. And now we have the official shortlist. So, like, I think we need a dialogue, maybe? I think there's something here on that we need to discuss. Yes, if nothing else. Maybe. I think create space. Yes, holding space in honor of Wicked for Good that's coming out later, right? Which I wonder what's happening with that press tour. I hope it's kind of as Wile E. Coyote as the first one. Remember all that? They were holding space. There was lots of crying. They were just holding fingers. It was a monumental moment. Yeah, back to the Booker. So I will say my shortlist was, I got 4 correct. I hate that term, but like I predicted 4. One of them that I was incorrect on, I'm not surprised about. And another one snuck up way out of left field. Like, I have not spoken to a single person, for the most part, that was not surprised by this title. Before we dive in, I want to do a quick reminder, right? So, the judging process, many of you probably already know, but if not, it's just nice to recenter ourselves, right? So many of you already know the judges for the Booker read an inordinate amount of books. I think it's almost like a book a day for several months. They read many, many books. Then they whittle it down to the Booker dozen, right? Like the 13. And then they reread the long list before they announced the short list. And I think they were about to reread them again before they announced the winner. And one of the only stipulations, I think, for the judges is that they are looking for kind of like a modern classic, or they're like looking for a book that will become a classic, meaning it needs to deepen on a reread. I think that that's key because as we can also look through some of them that didn't make it from a reread lens, I can potentially see why, yeah? Okay, we are doing these alphabetical from author last name, and the first shortlist title is Flashlight. And if y'all have been here for a minute, you know that this one was not on my list. This is the one I'm not necessarily surprised by because it's gotten so much love. It's on the long list for the National Book Award, as well as just general internet chatter, yes? I listened to what the judges had to say at the announcement. There's a great video, which I loved. You all should go watch it, of the judges discussing the shortlisted titles. I'll link it down below. I don't feel like anything they said changed my opinion on the book, which is fine. Though I do think Gabby Wood, who heads up the Booker, said something really interesting. She said, and this is not a direct quote, but something along the lines of, you're all reading a different book, even though you're reading the same book. Does that make sense? So I just want to hold space for the fact that just because it made it onto the short list does not invalidate the fact that this did not work for me. At the same time, it doesn't mean that I'm right. I think that's the big thing, too, that I just want to do as a quick caveat before we go into this. I'm not the type of person, though I can be loud and staunch, I don't need you to think like me. The reason why this is fun is because we all have different opinions. I love this because we can talk and debate. Savage Reads has been such a gift in my life and meeting him through these books because it feels like a window into having someone to bounce these ideas and discussions off constantly, right? And that's all I see for any of this. I'm never looking really to have someone think or feel the way that I do because, oh my gosh, how boring. Right? And if you're that way, I might challenge you to say, why? And why do you need someone to think the way that you do? Because isn't it so much more interesting about literature? Let's be crystal clear what we're talking about. You know what I mean? why would we want someone to have all of the same opinions? All the books would be the same. Oh God, how boring. You know what I mean? So I just wanted to say all of that because like I still don't like this book and that doesn't make me right. And you loving it doesn't make me wrong. Yeah, and them shortlisting it doesn't make me wrong. Does that make any sense? There are probably a lot of double negatives in there. Who's to say? Without giving too much away, this is a tale about a family that is also like a geopolitical thriller. I think that that's fair. And for me, the main characters, the father, the mother, and the daughter, are all unlikable. And I do think the mother has a kind of interesting arc and a bit of interesting growth, but 30,000 foot view, they're all relatively unlikable, and the father and daughter specifically. And I think part of and I like unlikable characters, and I think we can do a lot with them, and I think they're very interesting and dynamic when we really get in there and dissect it and like live in their flawedness, which actually we see later, which is so interesting actually that substantiates the fact that I do like flawed characters, because there's a shortlist title that's a very flawed character that I think is written brilliantly, but it's because we have the grounding of the other characters. I don't think you can write an entire work about unlikable characters without any sort of grounding unless there is like, there's just nothing to pull us along. For me, there was just nothing that like, where's my give a shit? I guess. You know what I mean? Because I do think the story's interesting. I just don't think it was executed in a way that drew me in. I do think the themes are interesting. I think they're fascinating, but they weren't executed in a way that drew me in. And again, that was my experience with this book, because we're all reading different books, even though we're reading the same one. You know what I'm saying? Also, I will say though, on the sentence level, Miss Choi can write a sentence. That's not a debate from love. I know what I said earlier. That's I think, Joe, just a fact. She can write at the sentence level. That's something you can't take away from her, or I don't think is even up for discussion. I will say I do think the way the sentences connected was very disjointed, which was also part of my like reading experience that I didn't really enjoy. Especially because I think it's that too paired with this like disjointed or disgruntled or like sharp characters. If we've got that and then the sentences, it's just like where's my groove? You know what I'm saying? Like I could never get in the groove of this book. And there's a character named Tobias, and 10 Toes on the Ground. Tobias did not get better on the reread. That's the one side eye about this. Tobias did not get better on the reread. He was very clearly written just for plot. There were too many things that did not make sense that we like started to explore but then completely ignored, and I don't think it was intentional. You know what I'm saying? Because we fleshed out so many other things that you're gonna say like that's the one thing that was like not fleshed out intentionally. No, that's not how she wrote the book. You know what I mean? But I will say, from a reread perspective, I could see how this book could give you more on a second reread because the themes are so deep and, vast, right? And the story, 30,000 Foot View is a good, cool story, but I don't like the way it's executed. Those are two different things. You can love the story, but not like the way it's executed. And that to me is the book from love. But that said, I could see how you get a deeper understanding. It was funny. I really did not like it. And ironically enough, I buddy read this with Simon, and Simon, it was not one of Simon's favorites either. And I did say, I was like, well, maybe if it's shortlisted, because I kind of am getting this feeling that it might be. I was like, maybe I'll reread it. And he got mad at me. So I probably will not be rereading this. I've considered rereading the ending because I want to see. No, I'm not. I'm not going to, because it's either all or nothing, I think. You know what I mean? Because like, do I think that I think the ending will land different if I just read the ending by itself. But then we don't have the like many, many pages, 400 pages that come before it. You know what I'm saying? It just didn't work. Didn't work for me. I also did love how we skipped years and major life events, sometimes between paragraph breaks. Like we would get into the nitty gritty about some of the most almost like insignificant things. And again, I don't think it was a commentary on the mundane because I know we could go there. I don't think that that's what it is. And we would just skip swaths of actually very interesting character development and plot points. What to propel the plot? That also turned me off. So again, that is my reading experience. Most of y'all love it. Many of y'all love it. And I go with God. You know what I mean? Love it. That's great. It's not for me. This is not shocking to me that it's included. I do feel like there are other titles that were left off the long list that were better executed, and that bums me out a little bit, especially because two of them, or even three of them, five of them actually, I know got deeper on rereads, but I didn't reread them. So who am I? Next up, second on the short list, as we are exploring them by author last name, is The Loneliness of Sonia and Sunny, which Simon Savage and I have lovingly referred to as the Sunny and Cher show. I actually did tell her editor that, and he got a good laugh out of it. I don't know if he relayed the message. I kind of hope he did. I think he said she would think it was funny. I loved this book. You can go watch my love fest. I do like some short, succinct love fests on some of my other social media platforms. I just did. I think it is a really special work. It's out. It came out on Tuesday. Go pick up a copy if you haven't read it. Really, I really feel strongly. It's a honker and a half, but I do think it's worth the investment. Languish in it. Don't set yourself a time limit to read it. Languish. It is a book for languishing and just reveling in her brilliance and just experiencing it. It's like if you've ever studied Italian, you just like, they always teach you, just let it wash over you. These Americans like freak out and they're like, allora, just let it wash over you. Yeah. Oh, I probably need to brush up. It's not as good as it used to be. Yikes. So all of that to say, I thought it was brilliant. I described it using astrology. I think in every instance that I've discussed this book, because I think it's complex to describe. Sun sign, what it shows to the world. It is a beautifully written love story. Rising sign, which is like what you grow into or what you are like internally. Fairy tale fable. And the moon sign of this book, which is like how you process emotions, is a tale of loneliness. And she explores loneliness through every facet and lens. And I would almost argue, you could potentially say that the moon sign is what's actually driving the structure of the work. I'm trying to find, So they're divided into these like parts. I don't know exactly. I'm assuming it's going to look something close to this. This is an arc. But so there are a bunch of these different parts and then with chapters within the parts. And I feel like each part explores loneliness in a really unique way. And that's kind of what's driving those part divisions, if I had to make a guess. Yes, plot is also integrated into that and like how we explore that. But I think that like that is the focus of loneliness for each part, or each part has a specific focus of loneliness, if that makes sense. Yeah, I think that it's beautifully done. I think her writing is incredible. Oh, I forget if I talked about it on here or somewhere else, but I have created something I call the detritus test. And it is the number of times the word detritus appears within a text or within a work. And I think that number should be very small. And I will say, I am 99.9% positive detritus appears once in this text, and it is incredibly written. So I throw down the gauntlet to all of the overwriters, and I say, if Miss Desai can find enough words other than detritus to use in a 700-page book, so can you. Oh, I'm being tongue-in-cheek about it, but yeah, I think it was 200 pages in, or 200 and something pages in, where she used it, and that was the only time we saw it. So I'm just saying, that to me is kind of like my barometer of like how overwritten is it. Passed with flying colors. I wonder if Flashlight, I wonder if she used it. I don't know. That's one of the nice things about Kindle. I think you can search words like that. Oh, I would love that. If somebody has that on Kindle, will you search that to see if she used detritus in Flashlight and just like let me know in the comments? because I do think it's a little overwritten. But yes, I love the loneliness of Sonia and Sunny. I've gone on and on about it. I don't know what more I have to like illuminate my thoughts on it. I will be really honest. This is the least surprising inclusion on the shortlist. It has nothing to do, honestly, with the author's reputation, with the prize and the fact that she's already won. I think that might potentially work against her for winning it. I think there's a world where that could actually come into play, maybe. But there was zero doubt in my mind that she was going to be shortlisted. It's that good. And I think it's worth it. And I'm not going to, you know how much I read? I am not going to suggest that you will spend your time reading a 700-page book if I don't think it's going to be worth it, because I do think that I wish you could see this table is filled with books. There are also books over here, and there are piles of books on the floor as well as here. I've also got a bookcase over there. Like, Insanity the Musical with the number of books I have over here. So all of that to say, like, I get how precious time is and like how many books many of us probably, if you're watching YouTube videos about books, you probably like to read. So you like how much time and how many books we want to read. So I wouldn't suggest a honker like this if I didn't think it was worth your time. I promise. I loved it. Okay, next up. This was part of my predictions as well. Audition by Miss Katie Kitamura. I'm not surprised about this at all. I know there were some folks who were like on the fence, not sure, but oh my God, yes. And if I was the judge, I would have read it front to back, because you could read this in a single setting, front to back, and then I would have started with part 2 and then read part 1 after reading part 2. I love it. I think it's brilliant. I am going to reread this, which, girl, it's been a while since I've reread a book. And in fact, the only book I've reread in recent history that I remember is Giovanni's Room, which that is saying a lot. Now, listen, I love my queen. I don't think this is a Giovanni's Room. I'm not meaning to suggest that. I'm just saying, like, I don't regularly reread books, and that's one of the ones of recent history I remember having reread. I'm excited. I'm excited to reread it. I'm seeing her speak on Thursday. If y'all have any good questions, let me know. I don't know if there will be a Q&A. I'm assuming. So let me know actually in the comments if you all have any questions, and I'll see if I can either weave that into one of my questions or use your question. I'm going to at Columbia. She has an event on Thursday, and I'm so excited. I cannot wait. So give me some inspiration, because I was like trying to craft a question at the gym, and it like wasn't quite right. It was a little ambly, so would love any help y'all have. But yeah, I think it's really fascinating. This book is about an aging actress. I believe, and I'm only saying this because the book's been out for a hot minute, okay? I believe it's about dementia. Simon doesn't believe that. By the way, we had a live where we talked about our shortlists, so I kind of have some of his fresh thoughts on mine as part of the reason I'm bringing him up so much. And also because I love him. Hi, Simon. So he's like he needs co-star billing in this YouTube today. But it's an aging actress that I believe this is about dementia and mental health. He said he doesn't agree, but kept it to himself. And so maybe I shouldn't be saying what I think it's about, but I feel like it's been out for a hot minute. And I feel like it's like a single sitting book. And like, I feel like the time has come for us to have that conversation, I think. I did have, and I've said this before, but I've had some folks in the comments say that like they didn't feel like they were having a conversation with the book, but I think the book is having a conversation with part 1 and part 2. At part 2, there's a giant narrative shift, and I think that is the conversation, and you're watching it. I just thought of this. What if it's like you're at the auditor's table watching the audition, or it's like a scene and you're watching the scene between the two actors and you're at the audition table? Ladies and gentlemen, listen, I don't toot my horn very often. That's not an unintelligent thought that I just had, okay? I don't, if y'all have not, I was an opera singer in a former life, and if y'all have not been in an audition room, you know, there's like a table, the auditors sit behind that, and then the actor or actors will be in front of them doing the scene or singing their aria or whatever. I'm gonna have to sit with that. I'm gonna have to think on that. Is that the question? I don't know. let's play with that. But yes, so now there are things in here that happen that feel slightly absurdist, but it lands for me, and mainly because I'm still thinking about it. I've read a lot of books. I think I've read 90 books this year, which is kind of insane. And I think it's because I'm like dissociating from everything that's going on in the world right now, which, listen, there's worse. There are worse ways to dissociate. And to keep me from doom scrolling. And for me to still be thinking about this book, that's just wild to me. You know what I mean? Like, sometimes I can be a real himbo and I finish a book and I almost forget what happens sometimes, depending on the book. But this one has just like really cemented itself in my brain, and my subconscious is still trying to figure out what happened and like what the narrative shift means and what it's doing. Which is why I feel like on a reread, this will absolutely deepen your understanding. Quick side note, just to go back to Loneliness of Sonia and Sunny, because it has those three key elements of like what the book is, and especially that fable fairy tale element that has like moments of magical realism that she weaves throughout, really a couple hundred pages in towards the end, like it ramps up as you get to the end. It's gonna deepen the read for sure, particularly because of a relationship that Sonia has at the beginning. It's very vibrant, and then we start to lose it a little bit there's distance by the end. And I think going back and reading it and being reignited and reintroduced to that very tense relationship will do a lot. I just realized I didn't touch on that. But yeah, so I think Audition is absolutely, you're going to get a deeper understanding on a reread. I'm excited for my reread, and to be excited to reread a book, you know what I mean? I think that's saying something. So yeah. Okay, folks, this next one, this for me came all the way out of left field. I heard some folks say that they felt that their understanding of the judge's perspective was illuminated a bit when they watched the shortlist announcement. I watched them discuss it, and it did not do much illumination for me. Yeah, I did agree with them in the sense that I think that this writing is beautiful, and it's the rest of our lives. The writing is beautiful. I do, and I've said this before. I think that this author-editor combo is a match made in heaven. I hope that they work together forever. Because, I mean, that said, like, I'm interested in reading his next book. I will be very honest, I'm not familiar with his work. I think he's published several works. Yeah, he's published many. So, like, I'm down. Like, I love his writing, but what's hard for me, and it doesn't make me right, is when we look at even Flashlight, when I don't feel like the themes are being executed on successfully, or I don't even feel like the story is necessarily being executed on in a way that resonates with me, I still feel like it is tackling more complex ideas, and I would rather see an author, in my humble opinion, stumble a bit in the execution of those complex ideas than something that feels a little more mundane. I think that there's something to be said about, like, you know, writing about something that's very relatable. I would say most of these other three that we've listed, you won't have had the experiences of any of those books. Maybe hints here and there. And do I think that some of those things happen to people in each of those books? Sure. But the exact experience, no. This, you might meet somebody at a cocktail hour that has had this very similar experience. Maybe not exact, but like in and around. And so maybe that's part of it, but I just don't feel like, even with something that's a little more mundane, which I feel like you could argue Sea Scraper was maybe a little more mundane, I still feel like there was so much depth there. This to me just didn't feel like it offered any depth. I'm really disappointed that one, but even two, but maybe even more, were excluded over this one, to be honest. And we'll talk about which ones those are at the end. I don't want to give away the great reveal, even though many of you probably already know what the shortlist is. That would not be surprising to me at all. So, yeah. It's a story about a man whose wife has cheated on him, and he makes a commitment to stay with her. By the way, I'm not giving anything away. It's the first couple pages. He makes a commitment to stay with her until his kids go off to college. Well, the book opens, the kids are going off to college, or the daughter's going off to college. And so he is taking a road trip to drop her off, and he drops her off and just keeps driving. And then, the rest of it ensues. I think that there are themes and there are plot points that happen here that they are a mirror to maybe what's happening to certain swaths of the country, or certain swaths of men specifically. And they may be touching on things that men go through and that men deal with, but I don't feel like we're illuminating or giving much more depth to those topics. Again, for me, because this was my experience when I read this book. And even though we're reading the same book, we're going to be reading different books. Does that make sense? Which is okay. It's great. Yeah, again, the prose is beautiful. Read the book. If you want to know how to make prose flow like a river, read the book. I think it's a brilliant lesson in that. But yeah, I also have a little bit of a hard time feeling like I would get something more out of it. Maybe, and actually, I wonder if you get more out of it because you have more empathy for the character. But then I push back on the whole concept of needing to get something out of a reread. But then, I'm arguing with myself, you're welcome. But then, if the point is a classic, and it's going to gain a deeper understanding upon each reread, and the idea is that people are continuing to read it, then reading it again with more empathy for the character, you will see him in a different light. So to that end, I could see a world where I would have more empathy for him, and I would think through certain elements of his choices and his life differently. Which that would change the entire book. Am I sitting here arguing with myself and convincing myself that I liked The Rest of Our Lives more? Potentially. Maybe. I don't think I'll reread it. I feel like I've got too many books on my list that I want to read. But I may reread a little chunk of it. Maybe the beginning. Because that's an interesting concept to me, and that's something I've not thought about and I've not discussed before. I'm going to need to meditate on that. Next up, The Land in Winter. Sweet baby Jesus, thank you. I am obsessed with this book. Listen, if you're in the US, I don't think it comes out until November 4th. Our cover is so much better than this, from Love. But you can order it from Blackwell's. Listen, you're going to get a better cover if you wait, but you get to read it sooner if you order it. It is a story about two couples, and it delves deep into their relationships as well as those that kind of orbit their relationships. It expertly and deftly navigates many complex subject matters, including homosexuality, in just the most subtle ways that are just like, wait, is he saying a what? It's just so intellectual and just so elevated and just layers on layers on layers. This, I know you're going to get something out of a reread. I know it. It also deals with mental health in a fascinating way. Pregnancy, particularly during this period of time. Someone mentioned the winter being a character. Sure. I think it's probably the least interesting character in the work. But yeah, I can see the winter is a very big, part of this, and creating different obstacles. I think that the relationships between adult children and their parents. There's a fascinating scene in a sauna between Bill and his father, which I thought was just so interesting and so much to unpack. And I almost feel like I would trust Andrew Miller to give me an entire book set in that sauna between those two men. Fascinating. The familial dynamics are wild. It deals with infidelity. It deals with mental illness. It deals with pregnancy. It deals with the medical field at that time. It deals with the truth versus fiction versus lies versus withholding. It's truly lovely. I cannot speak of this more highly. It's one of my favorites. Now, truth be told, there is one section that didn't quite work for me, but I am going to go back and reread just a piece of it to see if the problem was me. We were talking about mental illness at one point, and then we shift to the next chapter, next section, and it's from the perspective of a different character, and they're in a unique setting and environment. And for some reason, it took me like a hot second to figure out that it was another person. And then I was like, well, wait, do I feel that that's believable, that they're there and that things are happening that way? And it just felt off and odd. And I tied it back to what had come before, even though it was a different character. So like, it was just a little confusing for me in a way that kind of put me off. And then everything that came in that environment just felt a little crunchy. I think it was intentional, but I want to sit with that, and I wonder if I came into that section with a different mentality, if it would sit a little differently. That said, I think it's brilliant. I think the prose is incredible. I will say, now I feel like I'm talking out two sides of my mouth, but I will say there were certain moments that I found it hard to go back to the book for some reason. But once I was in it, I never wanted it to end. I stayed up very late reading this book. Like once I was in, I was just in. It's almost like listen, I could be wrong, but I think part of it's the cover. Part of it's the cover, and someone told me at one point that it was about like two couples trapped inside during this like giant winter storm that I think historically took place. No, that is not how I would describe this book at all. Yes, this winter storm takes place, and yes, it's about these two couples, but they're not stuck inside. And so like that being told that and then seeing this cover, I was like, I kept expecting like, okay, and now we're about to be locked inside and we're going to go like deep into their minds. And is this really going to be what I want to do right now? But it never did that. So I think that's actually what kept me from wanting to constantly go back now that I think about it. Thank you for being my therapy session for these books. I feel like I'm just uncovering troves of learnings about myself. Yes. And the last one on the short list is Flesh. To me, this is not a surprise at all. I read this long before the long list was announced. Actually, auditioned too. I read this long before the long list was announced. I loved it. It's one of my favorite reads of the year. I think it is just so brilliantly done. I think the sparse prose is so intentional and just like beautifully crafted. I think, Sarah Jessica Parker did say that she had never seen so many different subtext or so many different meanings for the word okay. That is perfectly put. Perfectly put. He's so, the protagonist is so withholding and so almost cartoon. That's not cartoonishly though, because I know men like this. He's just so withholding and so devoid of like, verbose communication that he like retreats to just like this very sparse, brittle connections to people, because a lot of the times he's saying okay. His response to so much is okay. Now, which is also interesting that I haven't thought about in a while because I finished it a long time ago. I wonder if part of that is because of some of the events that happen at the beginning of the book. I'm not going to give too much away, but I think that is an interesting tie and something interesting for us to think about, which again, I think is part of this book's success. And I think it's part of its look into the male psyche and flipping it on its head and giving us depth and an exploration of this stereotypical male psyche. Because again, as withholding as he is, there's a point in time in the novel where he's asking from others what he's refusing to give. And it's like, have y'all not dated a man like that? And if you haven't dated a man like that, are you that man from love? Because I think most of us have. So yeah, It's just fascinating. And I think it's a brilliant commentary. And I think he does it so successfully. He also takes us on a really interesting exploration of class. Yeah, what is the book about? I mean, that to me is at the core. If you're not interested in that, you're not going to like this book, or you're not going to get the book. You know what I mean? If you don't want to read about that, it's a story of this man and his life and growing up and these horrible things that happen to him. And then this woman that he meets and comes into this new life, and the kind of like how that dissolves and the aftermath of that, and like how he connects to those people with that next chapter. It's really interesting. I love it. 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 And to that end, that is why I think, and if you saw my cage match video, that's why I put this one up against The Rest of Our Lives. And like, sure, the cage match is obviously not how the Booker decides these things. But that's why I included Flesh over The Rest of Our Lives, because I feel like in many ways, while they're set in different countries and I believe different time periods, I have to double check that, they still like tackle this subject matter with very different depth, in my humble opinion. So it's a little difficult for me to put those two up against each other, or to think even within the 13 and think like, oh yeah, these are accomplishing this relatively tangentially similar goal in the same way. I don't think it is. So all of that said, it's a little tricky for me to think back over. So the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 that were not included. I feel like it's impossible for you not to get more out of universality. And because of that, I was thinking it actually had a possibility on the list. Oh, I think that was in my like little short list for ones that could be. Sea Scraper, I could see a world, and I talked about this a little bit on Simon and I's live over on Instagram on Monday. I think that I loved Sea Scraper. I think it's a beautiful jewel box of a novel. However, I don't feel like I could hold these up while I talk about them. I don't feel like I felt like the themes and what it was trying to do were very apparent. Everything was very out in the open, and it was like, this is what we're doing, and this is what we're talking about. I think I said it's like perfect for like a literature class, right? Like a high school literature class. And I don't mean that pejoratively. Like a high school literature class where it's like, okay, do you see this theme? Like tab this, because it's going to come up later. And how did this theme get realized through the work? And I think it does that really brilliantly. For me, I'm a reader that wants to have to dig a little bit more. I'm a reader that loves hearing okay 17,000 times and knowing that it means something different every time, and you kind of having to piece together what it means. That's the type of reader I am. That's how we like can read the same books, but they're totally different. You know what I mean? So it's not taking away from its success. I think it's a beautiful jewel box of a novel. But because that's the type of reader I am, there is a world where I could see that rereading this doesn't actually necessarily deepen the understanding, because it gives everything to you so beautifully right out on the table. You know what I mean? So you read it once and you're like, you know what I mean? Respectfully. Love Forms I was really bummed not to see on this shortlist, because I also feel like this one, without a doubt, you're getting more on the second read. I just know you are. I feel that the themes are deep. I feel that it is a very dynamic work. I think that it is very special. So for that end, I was disappointed to see that left off the list, especially over one or two of these from Love. And Endling, I think, was really a glaring absence. There's glaring absence from the shortlist having this title not be on the list. I think. Listen, I'm speculating. Is it maybe the break with form? I think that Maria Reva really breaks with form here and does a lot of really interesting things. Maybe that didn't resonate with enough judges. In their video, they talked about a traffic light system where they would rank books green, yellow, red, and then they would individually then combine them, and they would see what everyone's rankings were, and then they would have a robust conversation about it. So maybe the breaking with really drastically with form wasn't something that resonated with a lot of the judges. That's the only thing I could see, because I do feel like reading this a second time, you are getting more out of it. Except those yurt makers. In the second time they show up, nobody's been able to explain those to me. And I don't listen. I can be a pretty big himbo, but sometimes the light bulb's screwed in okay. You know what I mean? And I think I get the yurt makers really clearly the first time they appear, but the yurt makers come back. And it doesn't make any sense. And somebody's tied up. That makes even less sense. Know what I mean? Why are the yurt makers there the second time? Help me understand. And maybe that's the judge's problem. I'd be surprised, but yeah. Next up, the South. I'm going to be honest. This is one I could see not getting so much more depth the second time through, especially because the way the book opens. I often wonder if it undercut itself a little bit by structuring it the way that it did, because you kind of tell us up front what's going to happen, and then there's a little bit of tension, but it's kind of obvious, you know, who and where this is going to take place, and then it does. You're like, okay. So I could see a world where, even though there are secrets and it is dynamic, and again, I think I am going to read the rest of the series, or grouping, or I don't know what we would want to call it, this collection of 4, but this one I could see not necessarily getting more on the second read. Misinterpretation, I could also see certain elements of this popping up as holes versus being more successful, but I also feel the same way about Flashlight. But there are other elements of this that I think will deepen, like the noir elements. I think will become even more lush. The flower imagery. Have y'all read this? Like, what the flowers are fascinating to me. It was interesting. I was watching Margaret Atwood's masterclass. I think it's really lovely. If you haven't watched it, I think it's totally worth your time. And she talks a lot about flower imagery, and she used it a lot in The Handmaid's Tale. And I was listening to that like right after I finished this book, and the way she talks about flowers at the end, what made me want to go back and like dissect where all the flowers took place throughout the book. Yeah. So anyways, and also for One Boat, this is a world where I think you will get more out of it on a second read, but do you want to read it a second time? Because the last chapter flips everything on its head, and I talked about this a little bit, but I get to the last chapter and I'm not excited about going and reading the rest of it through that new lens. Section 10 though, read section 10, vignette 10, whatever, read it. You know what I mean? We're like audition, I get to the end and I'm like, oh, now I need to go back and reread this. Or like Hunchback, I got to the end of Hunchback, and we're talking about now the International Booker. I got to the end of Hunchback, and I went back and I read the last 50 pages again, because immediately, literally, because I was like, oh wait, what happened? Did I miss something? Oh my God, I need to revel in this. Yeah. So yeah, that said, those are my feelings. I think that my biggest bummers for not being on the shortlist are Endling and Love Forms. I think that those two are missing, in my opinion, from this list. I will say I argued with myself quite successfully, potentially, for the rest of our lives. So I'm intrigued to get my mind changed on that. And I have yet to feel like Flashlight has been presented or substantiated to me in a way that causes me to see it from a different light, which I think might just be okay. You know, maybe we just have different reading experiences with that, even though we're reading the same book, and I am at peace with that. So I hope you all are too. All right, y'all. We just talked a lot about the Booker shortlist. I have had so much fun this Booker season reading all 13 of these books. I'm gonna be honest, I always read chunks of the Booker long list. I don't know if I finished the Booker long list before the shortlist was announced. I'm proud of myself, and I think we should all be proud of ourselves for engaging in any dialogue around some of these incredible works of fiction. Because all that said, we can sit here and we can give our opinions and we can nitpick and we can discuss ad nauseum until we're literally blue in the face, but like, these are all great books. You know what I mean? Even the ones I didn't like. You know what I mean? I'm not sure. The prose sentence level crafting. You know what I mean? Like, we can find something that's great in all of these. Okay. Let me know what your thoughts are, please. I think that I asked several questions. Let me know what y'all think Audition is about. I cannot wait to hear your thoughts on The Loneliness of Sonia and Sunny once you read it. I would love to hear if you feel like my argument for the rest of our lives changed your mind at all. If you can help me understand Flashlight, but again, I need substantiation for how you feel like the story and the themes were executed against successfully. Like, what is the grounding that we're getting to make us care about these unlikable characters by the end, and not just because that bad thing has happened to them. And maybe I just have a different relationship with death because of other things that have gone on in my life, which that's another video for another day. So like maybe that's also just a personal thing. Oh, and I'm dying to know, I know it's not on the short list, but yurt makers, let me know why they're there the second time, please. Okay. How are y'all feeling about the short list? Are you happy? Are you sad? I hope we can find a little bit of peace. The world's on fire, yeah. Hopefully we're not too mad. That would be Insanity the musical. So yeah, let me know your thoughts in the comments, and I cannot wait to be back next week, and we'll chat some more books.